Okay, these radiator hose clamps, ideally you'd use a hex head. I just didn't want to mess around having the wrong size, but look at the screwdriver clearance issues already. Let's just see if the bolts that held the water pump on are by any chance the same size die or head as the ones that are the hose clamps. Where do you suppose? Here's the one for the bigger bolts. Yeah, that didn't take much, did it? That didn't take too much. It's bigger than this size, but my eyesight is so poor, I can't read what size it is. All I know is it's some size bigger than that. Yeah, my up close eyesight in the past years just gone to shit. Alrighty, well, we took care of draining, so that's one part out of the way. Now we'll take off these radiator hoses, and customer didn't supply new radiator hoses. Says he's going to get some. If this is my car, I'd say fuck it. I'd say it's good enough. I wouldn't put new ones on. But if you're paying someone else to do it, maybe do it, get it done with. I guess you're going to look at things a lot different when you're doing repairs yourself than when you're having someone else do them. If you're taking this in to have somebody else work on it for exorbitant labor fees, you're certainly going to have them replace the hoses while they're doing a job like this. Where you're doing it, if you do it yourself, you can make the call, and boy, those hoses don't look too bad to me. They not the slightest bit bad. No cracks, no bulges. I wouldn't worry about these hoses at all if it was my car. Not even a little bit. Wouldn't even worry a little bit. So, oh, wrong one. So, would not be my concern. Now, that could very well end up not being the customer's concern too. So, we'll put a little bit of grease on it when we put it back together so you can get them off. If you ever want that, you need to take them off. A lot of people aren't too crazy about that. They say it'll damage the hose. I've never ever seen any bad thing happen to a hose because I did that. There is a heater hose here too that comes off this one water neck type deal. So we'll have to remove that. That's a good old spring clamp. And we got this hose here on the top side. We may have to use a channel lock pliers to break that guy free. Yeah, probably will. Now the other thing too is you want to make sure you don't lose your hose clamps. That one's going to stay where it's at. The other one I'll have to kind of keep track of. All right, usually you can just give these a little bit of a twist and they'll come loose. So let's just see what happens here. You want to keep your hose clamp out of the way so you don't damage that. And you don't want to get too aggressive here because you don't want to damage your hose. Usually if you just get it moving just a little bit, she'll come right off. And see the corrosion there? That's why they're hard to remove. But you put just the teeniest amount of grease on them, and this probably won't stick to your thing. Oh yeah, there's a little bit of iron in there. Stainless steel usually won't stick very good, but the screw probably is not stainless steel. So that allows that to stick to that magnet. Now, one other thing, we got a spring clamp, heater hose clamp here. And by the way, what the problem with this car is it was making a noise. So the bearing must be going out on the water pump. And geez, usually with American cars, you get water pump starts going out, it's because it leaks. That's the problem. I suppose there's a good chance we're leaking. Won't be far behind on this one. That's the other thing. This is my car. I'd just turn up the radio probably, but that's just because I could fix it at any given time. You do have to look at it differently when you are you know, helpless and can't fix things yourself. So that's kind of one of the reasons why you want to be able to fix things yourself, because it gives you so much more freedom. Let's say you're only going to keep the car for another 6 months. That's making a, well, you just let it make that noise, wouldn't you? So, but if you don't know how to take care of stuff, you get a lot more afraid of things. So, you know, what I'm saying is, knowing how to repair things can save you money, even if you don't repair them. Because you'll know when you can say, ah, screw it, I ain't doing it. And so, the more you learn, the more you save. And there's our old water pump, sports fans. Let's see what it sounds like. Let's see if the bearing did sound bad. Oh yeah, it's nasty. It's hard to turn. Yeah, it makes noise. Let's see what our new one's like. Let's see what our new one's like. From AutoZone. Okay, who does not sponsor this channel? Who should? Because then I could get free. Oh, it's like silk. Like silk. Okay, now we'll put this thing back together and put some coolant in there. And put our hoses on, put some coolant in it, and it'll be good. Now, we've got a gasket, and they also gave us some gasket sealer. And I don't believe I'm going to use this. I don't believe I'm going to use this because then we have to wait for that to set up. And I'm not a big fan of silicone unless I have to use it. If it says in these instructions that I should silicone it, I'll do it. But, you know, a lot of people, they'll silicone everything. Silicone, 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 you know. They won't even use the factory supplied gaskets or, and they silicone everything. Well, that means they have to wait 24 hours before they can fire up the car. Who wants that? I want the thing going. I'll just look in these instructions really quick. Kind of a rare thing. Probably get this on video because it's a picture of me reading instructions. That doesn't happen. Actually, I think I'm better than most people at reading instructions. Let's just see. I have a quick go over this while we pause for a while, and I'll let you know if there's anything interesting in these instructions. Here, show you what we have done. We took the water pump off. We took our hoses off. There wasn't anything too exciting there that we didn't get on film or video, whatever you want to say. But we got that water pump off, and we did clean up that mating surface. It was pretty good. Probably wiped that off with a rag one more time. A few hunks of junk there, but cleaned up pretty nicely. Now, just because the instructions say it, I'm going to put a little bit of silicone sealer on this gasket. On stuff that's my own stuff, I'll do things a little bit more my own way. But when it's somebody else's, I just follow the instructions. I tend to follow the instructions pretty close to the letter because that way, if there ever is a problem, it's not because I didn't follow the instructions. So it said coat her with a thin layer of silicone. And I'm sure there's plenty of you out there that think, oh, you shouldn't be touching that silicone with your bare hands. You should wear gloves. And my response to that is, if it hurt you, I'd be dead by now. You know, so even though I'm not a big fan of using it, I've used enough of it to. The other thing it says is, don't use too much. You'll squeeze some of that into your cooling system, and it probably won't cure up by the time you're got your car all put back together and add your coolant, and then you'll have that crap floating around in the motor, and you don't want that. So we'll just make sure it's just the smallest amount with no extra sticking out, and that's why I'm doing it this way by hand rather than putting a bead on it, because I just don't want there to be any excess. So, and the thing is, you probably don't want to have this on your fingers like I do. I bet it's somewhat acidic, just the way it smells. So, probably not a good thing to have on your fingers, but I've made it so far. Okay, now our new water pump is right here, so we're going to turn that upside down, lay it right on top of turn it upside down there, and we're going to put our gasket in place. And then we'll put a bolt through it to kind of hold the gasket on. But I have to kind of get this here so I can clean off my fingers. And I do believe we have a small enough amount on there where it's not going to cause any problems, but a big enough amount on there, a large enough amount where it'll actually do something. So that's the way we're doing that. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of silicone if you don't need it, because it just makes the gasket harder to take apart in one piece if you ever have to do the job again. So I'm not a big fan. You know, it comes in handy for doing something where you don't have any gasket at all and you don't have a gasket material to make one, or it's a hard gasket to make. But I know a lot of people, particularly on small block Chevy intake manifolds, instead of using those factory supplied rubber gaskets on the front and back, they'll just use silicone. They won't even use that right off the bat. They won't use it. I don't know why, but that's the way they do it. So I'm going to stick in my bolt number 2 and my bolt number 1. This is bolt number 2. Get that in there, and bolt number 1. And that should at least let the gasket stay in place. And this is why it was so important to number these and keep track of them, because that certainly isn't intuitive about which bolt would go where, is it? That's even a smaller amount of metal that one's got to go through, and it's a much longer bolt. So it is not, don't rely on intuition to get you through, particularly when you're working on something that wasn't made in America. I swear to God, the further away you get from the USA, the less intuition there is involved with something. I'm going to get these threaded on just enough so we can get our gasket, make sure our gasket isn't going to go anywhere. And so there we go. Once we get these two in, then we can be fairly confident that our gasket isn't going to go anywhere. That one wasn't even started. I'm going to get just a little bit of thread on them, because I do not want to lose the gasket. That's the most important thing. If that gasket falls, not only do you have a situation where you have to find it and pick it up, but it's going to fall in the crud. You know, and you just know the floor's got like gravel on it and dirt and stuff, and you just don't want to deal with that. If it was a dry gasket, no big deal, but once again, we're getting back to my reasons why I'm not a big fan of silicone on gaskets. You drop the gasket, it's going to be just like when you drop toast and it always lands butter side down, right? Only this side, with this deal, both sides are buttered, so no matter what, you lose. So I have all kinds of reasons why I don't use silicone on gaskets, unless it's someone else's car, and then I just follow the instructions. Follow the instructions to the letter, and then you don't have to worry about anything coming back to you. Okay, I got those two on. I'm going to put a little bit more threads on them. And just to make sure it doesn't just fall out. So we'll just get a few more threads on that sucker. And that's that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put just a little dab of grease inside these hoses. And look, here's where maybe I should have hooked up some of these hoses before I put the pump on, but it's going to be kind of a pain in the ass. But my concern about dropping the gasket was bigger than my concern about having it easy to put those hoses on. So what I'm going to do here, like I always do, take my grease gun, get just a little dab of grease. And I don't think it makes much difference whether you put it on the inside of the hose or the outside of the nipple of the water pump. I really don't. I don't think it makes too much difference. I think the end result is the same. So quite often I end up doing whatever's easiest. In this case, we'll put some in there like that. And you don't need a whole lot. You really don't. And I've never had anything bad happen. I'm sure there's all kinds of people out there that, oh, you can't do that. You can't get grease in the cooling system. Well, there ain't much, because most of this is going to be between the, yeah, by all means, don't overdo it, you know. Don't use more than you need. But I tell you, it sure keeps the... It sure makes it easier to take a hose off later. And like I said, I've heard people say, you know, that'll soften up the radiator hoses, and I don't know, never seen it happen. I have seen, I had a 66 Chevy pickup with a snowplow on it, with a full hydraulic, fan belt driven hydraulic system. And that hit the return hose for the hydraulics was just regular old heater hose. And I will admit that got soft. And that basically had ATF flowing through it for, oh, by the time I got the truck, it was 15 years old. So it was bathed inside with ATF continuously for 15 years. And yeah, the hose appeared soft on the outside, but it never failed. So I think these hoses can handle this. I really do. And now it comes time for us to remember. Well, it's a miracle, huh, that I remembered that. Usually I put on a hose before I remember the clamp, and then I have to either take off the hose or unscrew the clamp all the way to try and get it on. But here's where we would have benefited from putting the hoses on first before we bolted on the water pump, but I just didn't want to drop the gasket, not with that silicone on it. So we're gonna just try working with this thing. I think we can get it. Okay, usually if you, sometimes it's a struggle. I'll get a screwdriver and try and get it. Usually one side or the other isn't going to want to be on. So what you want to do is get it so the back side is on and the front side is not on, and then you can work on the front side. So there we go. I think I got her. I think I got her. I'll just feel it. Not quite. Not quite, but almost. And like I said, here's the other thing. They were talking about new hoses, but they don't have the new hoses yet. So either way, they're going to eventually be dealing with a situation where they are trying to put new hoses on a water pump that's already installed. So we'll just keep fighting with this. And believe me, it won't seem near as difficult when 90% of this is edited out, okay? There, I got her on now. And see, what I'm probably going to do is I'll just hit the cut button on the editor, and we'll just cut out that part where it was difficult, and you'll just see me putting it together slicker than hell. And look at what we got here. Look what we got here, sports fans. Look at that. Look at that. Almost had a disaster there, didn't we? But that obviously was number 6, and all the bolts are left over at the same size. So we were lucky. We knew it was going to happen too, that I would disturb that. We were talking about it, but I think we got away with it because all the bolts left are the exact same size except for those last two, which were actually a bigger diameter. So it's almost impossible to mix those up, and they're both the same length. So we actually now, once we got those first 2 bolts, and we ended up being golden. But it just goes to show you how you do have to pay attention. Another thing about these hose clamps, you know, you'll tend to loosen them much further than they actually need to be because the clamp ends up sticking to the hose and you think it's still tight, and it's not. It's just stuck to the hose. So we'll just turn this in here. They do get kind of irritable, but once we finally hit the hole, it should be pretty easy because our gasket's held in place exactly where it needs to be. So we can just turn this in. There we go. We'll turn them all in finger tight, and then we'll work around the side to side, and get her in. There. Is that one good? Let's see. There we go. Quite often, when they say finger tight, what they mean is not tight. Sometimes just because something's got a bolt is a little bit cocked or something, you can't turn it by your finger. So you got to thread them in with a wrench. But they don't, what they mean is don't put any torque on them. And I've seen one of the most irritating things for me is when a bolt is too tight to turn by your fingers, but it's too loose to make the ratchet handle click back. And it also makes you think how incredibly weak you are if you can't turn something that the ratchet wrench, it isn't even tight enough to make the ratchet wrench click back. That's kind of disappointing. And sometimes it's actually easier to just use the wrench, particularly in low clearance situations. Obviously, in a normal, wide open situation, you're going to be able to turn a nut or a bolt faster by your fingers. But as soon as you get to the point where you ain't got much manual dexterity, a lot of times the wrench becomes quicker. So, and that's kind of what we got here. I can barely get my hand in there, let alone turn it. So we'll get these put in and snug down, and then we'll have to put on our pulley, and we'll have to put on our belt, and we have to put on that bottom splash pan. And then the job will be done for the day. But then we still have waiting for us tomorrow, putting in the coolant, firing it up, make sure that it doesn't leak, make sure everything seems proper. And sometimes putting it on is a little tougher than taking them out, because putting them on, you have to see exactly where they go. I know I'm really close. But I'll have to give Mercedes high marks for ease of water pump replacement. Because some cars, this job is just a huge job. I'm comparing it to my Honda, where I had to take off the front wheel, and I had to take off the driver's side top engine mount, and I have to take off power steering pump, air conditioning compressor, alternator. Now, of course, the belts for those. Of course, we had to remove this one belt for here, but I also had to remove the front plastic engine covers. It just never ends. So this car gets high marks for that. Might have to loosen up a couple of these just a little bit. Probably got a little overzealous there. Certainly don't have them tight, but I also don't have enough room for wiggling here. So let me just take these back a couple threads. Just enough to give her a little slop. There we go. Yep, there. Now we should be able to start that. Yep. Okay, now it's a matter of tightening up these bolts. Time on something, I think. You know? Mm-hmm. I wish they were all like this. Of course, if they were all like this, everybody would do repairs, and then you wouldn't stand out in the crowd and be awesome, you know, so I don't know what to tell you. Alrighty, I've got them all finger tight, and now we will start to put torque on them. One at a time at a 180-degree offset. I'm not going to put full torque on them. I'm just getting it a little bit tight with a wrench, and 180, as close to 180 degrees off as we can get it. I don't have a torque spec on this. It ain't much though, because they're easy to break free. So if they're easy to break free, it ain't much. So I'm just going to go with, for my torque, not much. That's what I'm going to go for my torque spec. I broke them free with a 1/4-inch drive ratchet. What does that tell you? Without even grunting. Wasn't even grunting. So you know it ain't much. Okay, now the last one here. Now I'm going to put what I think should be the right amount of torque on them. Okay, so there's one. That's a good guess. I'm going to go with that. And down here, let's see if we can find, there we go. There's 2. And I think that's a pretty good guess. Here's number 3. Which is a different way than my original numbering, but I'm just counting because I want to get to 8. That's a pretty good guess. 4. Good guess right there. 5. 6. 7. 8. There we go. Now I didn't NICs compound them, but they were so clean and so nice, and just no problem at all. Not much torque. Don't really think we're going to have a problem there. Okay, now that we got the water pump bolted on to the proper torque specs, we will bolt on our pulley to the proper torque specs. And this I did use the NICs compound on these 4 bolts. So and the same deal here. You'll put a little bit of torque on them 180 degrees apart. I was able to break it loose by holding on a hand, so you probably don't have to worry about them being too tight. You can just get them snug and that'll be good enough. We'll check it one more time once the belt's on, because the belt will really help hold it. Okay, next step is going to be putting on the belt. We got a new belt for this car. And we'll compare to the old belt, make sure it's the right size. Okay, so what we did here is we just reused the coolant because we're not doing a complete cooling system flush here, so they might as well use the coolant that was in it. We did filter it just in case some contaminants got in it, and dumped it right back in. And now we're going to fire this thing up and let the car warm up. We're going to check to make sure nothing's leaking, and let the air purge out of the system. And once it gets up to operating temperature, we'll add enough to make sure it's topped off. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to fire this thing up now. Now you can just